Hello, and welcome to another video. I'll be running through the process I used to paint up this nun with a pistol from Reaper Miniatures, the Bones line to be exact. The rationale behind doing this project is that I wanted a quick project that will allow me to practice some glazing, which is a skill I need to develop in order to lift my game in terms of paint quality. To start with, I want to prepare the nun's habit to eventually become black, so I'm going to put down my intermediate color of coal black evenly all over the habit, and this will take some time, so I am going to speed it up a bit. So that is our base coat down. We've put about 3 to 4 layers of coal black down, so we've got a nice even coverage now. The next stage is to mix up a thin glaze of our color, Thalmar black. The consistency of this glaze should be mostly water with only a small amount of paint. The idea is to get it thin enough so that it only stains the model lightly rather than covers it. Glazing is a particularly time-consuming method of painting, but overall it can be one of the most effective in terms of getting a smooth transition from one color to the other. Here you can see the consistency that I'm aiming for creating this glaze. There is a lot of back and forth in testing the consistency, adding more water, adding more paint, and so on. Yeah, that's about right. We want it fairly heavy on water and only lightly staining, well, a surface that we paint on. Unfortunately, a lot of this process is figuring out your consistency and getting it right, so like I said, it's a very time-consuming method of painting. But now that we're actually painting, this is pretty much how you do it. First of all, I'm going to start doing an overall tint, so starting from the top, dragging it down. I'm especially trying to concentrate in areas where there's going to be lots of shadows, so all the folds towards the lower half of the habit, and you'll notice that on the sculpt, the backside partially shadows the bottom half of the habit, so we're going to try and focus our shadows in that shaded area. Our highlights, on the other hand, we will be focusing on the curvy part of her backside, ending towards the small of her back. This was mostly me practicing the whole process at this stage, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to speed it up by about a factor of 4, just so you can see it happen at a reasonable pace. We're starting to get that difference of color now, with the black starting to become more pronounced in the shade areas. To the point where it's, yeah, obviously significantly different from the areas which are in highlight. I'm also going to focus a bit of the glaze into some of the folds and along the edges where the habit meets another item of clothing. I'm laying it in a bit thicker than I would normally into the deepest folds to try and really get that shadow happening. Now we're doing an all-over glaze to try and actually tint the entire thing down so it's close to black rather than coal black. Now we're going to work on our highlights. Our first highlight will be a mix of coal black and frostbite, with leaning more heavily towards the coal black, as we don't want to make our highlights too extreme just yet. And we'll be painting it on in the same manner, using a very, very thin glaze. I love this. It almost looks as if I know what I'm doing. You'll notice that rather than starting at the top and dragging my brush towards the bottom, I'm starting at the bottom and dragging my brush towards the top. This ensures that if any coffee staining does happen, it helps to keep the color in the places where the highlights should be, basically. We'll also start to build up the highlight color on some of the folds of the habit, just as you would doing a cloak or any other piece of clothing. So I'm going to increase the intensity of my highlight here and concentrate further up the miniature. Well, I said further up, but I guess also on those lower raised folds, I suppose. That's equally valid. Quite frankly, I'm amazed how often I surprise myself when recording these videos. It's like, at the time of recording, I only did this like an hour ago. Short memory, I guess. So yeah, unfortunately this is a lot of, well, back and forth, so I'm going to speed it up until we hit another interesting portion. So yeah, as I demonstrated on the folds of the habit towards the bottom, I'm going to lay the shade in fairly heavily. I don't know what the name of the headdress part of the whole habit thing is, but basically that part where in between her face and the top covering, I'm going to lay a lot of shade in there, and also in the small of her back, because those are the areas in the model which are most hidden from light sources. So you can see we're now really starting to get the general shape of the habit happening with our shades and highlights. I believe after this I ended up yeah, starting to really work on those highlights to bring a lot more of that coal black back, and then move past it to get some more Frostbite in to really bring that contrast. So this is the third Reaper Bones mini that I've painted, the first two being at PAX, and as with the other two, I'm not particularly impressed. They're difficult to clean up due to the whole springy nature of the plastic, meaning filing ends up just roughing it up without smoothing off the surface. So if you're going to trim it, it'll have to be with a hobby knife, and that requires a lot of work, and even then still doesn't make a clean surface. It's not a good scene. So yeah, but still, you can't beat the price for $3, I suppose. They're also good painting practice fodder as well. If you screw up, you're not losing a great deal. I've also got some little grey alien dudes at some point, which I'll I don't know if I even care to get to them at some point. I've got way too much on my painting table. Anyway. So we're going to gradually keep adding in more Frostbite to our coal black as we do our highlights, until we get to a level where, I don't know, you just feel comfortable that the highlight is sufficient. I find this varies between person to person and personal taste, but yeah, generally if you think it looks good, you can't really go wrong with that, so yeah. Okay, I've already made a start on the, I don't know, apron part of the habit, whatever it's actually called in real life. So first of all, I'm going to put down basically I'm going to underpaint it with Menoth base, Menoth white base, sorry, yeah. I do this because I find it really hard to build up a smooth white. And even then, in this particular model, I think I failed in getting that like overall smooth coat of white. But, you know, live and learn. So we're moving on to our main coat now, and the color we are using is Menoth White Highlight. This is a pretty good off-white and will serve as an adequate base for, I don't know, some fairly light white linen. That's what we're aiming to achieve with this. So, doesn't get much more exciting than this, so I'm going to skip over a whole bunch of it until we get to the really interesting stuff. So, we are ready to commence the glazing. The colour we'll be using for this is our original Menoth white base. And to start with, we'll aim for the recesses and bring it in, basically. So yeah. Not much to really say about it. Aim for the parts such as the, well, overhangs, I guess, to talk about it euphemistically. And you should start to get a good impression of shadow almost at once. It will, of course, take several more coats to fully intensify the shadows, but like this is only the second one in and it's already having a very pronounced effect. So yeah, we'll continue to take our time, build up those shadows gradually, and soon we'll move on to our highlight. Okay, so like an idiot, I completely forgot about recording footage of getting our white highlight down. So I guess I'll just run through it instead while we're base coating the face right in front of you. All I did was mix some Morrow white with the Menoth white highlight and gradually build it up in the areas where the most light would be concentrated. And of course try and get that gradual transition from the Menoth white base to the pure white happening. So if you look, yeah, just above the folds in the apron, you can see where it transitions up slightly. So yeah, unfortunately there's not really much more to say about the whole base coating of the flesh, so we're gonna skip it. You know what, I've already covered faces in previous videos. I'm just gonna skip the entire thing until we get up to something I haven't shown before. So, I'm gonna do something I don't normally do with firearms. That's a phrase that sounds really bad when taken out of context. Anyway, I'm going to aim to do the revolver with basically gold-plated pearl handled. So obviously a nun's not really meant to be holding a weapon in most cases anyway, and this kind of weapon even less so. So it gives the entire thing a bit of a Tarantino gangster movie kind of feel in terms of its ridiculousness. So I'm not actually going to use a gold, well, what it says on the tin, gold color for our gold. I'm instead going to use brass balls. And this, like most other metallics, will take many layers to properly build up, so let's accelerate. Oh yes, I'm also doing the crucifix the same color, mostly just to save time. For the beadwork and the necklace, I'll be using assorted metals. So for the base color, I'll be using pig iron, and for the highlight, I'll be using Quicksilver, which I'll also use as a highlight for the revolver coming up. I admit, I got a little lazy here, so we're up to shading the metals now, and this is something I've never really been good at, and I want to get some practice, which is using inks to shade metals. Now, I'm not applying it in an overall manner as one would a wash. I'm trying to deliberately work some of the ink into the crevices. So first up, I'm doing the initial layer of, I believe this is P3 Flesh Wash, into all of the recesses on the revolver. Now I'm going to repeat the process, except with an even smaller surface area and using actual brown ink. And I'll also do the same for the crucifix. and I'll just also end up cleaning it up a little bit to prevent it from staining the fabric a bit too much and looking strange. Finally, I'm going to get out some Armour wash and use that to do basically a traditional wash over the beads and the necklace. Now onto highlighting. We're going to use Quicksilver to basically give a highlight to the gold on the gun. Oh, I just decided to quickly do the eyes while I was bored, I suppose, waiting for everything to dry. That's something I'd like to do whenever I'm waiting for something to dry, is like pick somewhere else in the model which needs attention and do that. Saves time, I find. So I'm just doing a few steps to neaten up the eyeballs, get the iris looking a little more exact, and to make absolutely sure her gaze is obviously following the direction she is pointing. Anyway, now on to painting the, nope, still highlighting the gun. Alright, so we're going to do just a small highlight of Quicksilver on the necklace, and then we're just about done for the metallics. So, home stretch, just to finish off her base. The colours I'll be using for this are Sanguine base and Bloodstone. So the base, the miniature comes pre-sculpted with some sort of like tiled-like base. I imagine this is some sort of like terracotta, like cantina floor of some kind. I'm definitely imagining this model as some kind of like strange character from a Tarantino movie now, set in Mexico for some reason. I'm strange. So we're going to establish our base coat as we would any other color, so 2 coats, nothing fancy, just let's get through this and move on with our lives. Alright, so you saw in the previous fast forward and in this section now, we're putting down some black lines between the tiles to, I don't know, just separate them. Also, I'm getting a start on the lip of the base. One thing you also didn't see is that I put a small line of black in between the model, in between the character's, I don't know, hem of the habit, I suppose, and the floor, just to try and begin that dark lighting process. We're going to further get some further shadows on the floor imminently as I sort out my highlight and shade colors. So this is a little weird. The colors I've used, Sanguine base and Bloodstone, have like shades of strange things like, let me have a look at my book. I haven't written this down. well. Suffice to say, oh yes, blue and green. So you basically need to mix them together and you get some vaguely brownish color. But if you glaze that in, that looks like a very realistic shadow. I don't know, well, I have a theoretical understanding of why it works. It just seems really weird and really counterintuitive to me, but hey, that's what the color wheel is for, right? We're going to apply this shade in the, I don't know, crevice between the character and the floor, and glazed in many times until it starts to affect that transition from the base color to the shade color. Oh yeah, another thing I'm doing at this point is I am glazing some white onto that pistol handle every now and then in order to build it up to try and make it look like it's ivory or pearl or something suitably gaudy. So, final highlights now, using, I think it's Rucksack 10 and Sanguine highlight. We're going to gently dab out a mix of the base color and the highlight color on the very edge of the tiles, facing the lip of the base, until we've built up enough of a highlight color. And once that is done, we can call this project done. So, on to the final review. For what it is, how cheap it is, and the fact that in terms of time spent, this was only about maybe 4 hours of an afternoon in total. It's a pretty decent paint job for what it is. I managed to get the transition from the black to the frostbite handling to a degree with which I'm very happy with. And also the apron didn't turn out too bad as well, which, yeah, I have a lot of trouble with white, so I'm impressed with how that turned out. It is a bit patchy, but yeah, the model certainly didn't help with matters, I have to say. Once again, I'm not a very big fan of the Reaper Bones material. It's... I don't think it... I do love how in the Reaper marketing literature there's a claim that you don't need to undercoat the miniatures. Well, I don't really believe it, so I did use my usual Tamiya Fine Surface Primer in grey, and even so, it's still... the paint still had some trouble adhering entirely. And I'm beginning to notice a few spots where it's beginning to rub off already. It's a material for display miniatures. I just don't like bones. And for gaming miniatures, well, I suppose you could use it. You'll just have to make sure you varnish the hell out of this before you do. Though, despite all of that, I actually had a lot of fun painting this one. I've been doing armies for so long, it's nice to just sit down and do a single model for once. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time. Cheers.